if you take a step back, if you think about where does product manager as a role kind of started to evolve and become more prominent, there is a history to it, right? It started off from some of the core sectors like FMCG and manufacturing, where like for example, in an FMCG sector, a product manager would be responsible for launching a new product line, let's say a new detergent variant in the market to address some of the product market gaps that exist in the ecosystem today, right? That is where the product manager as a terminology kind of got initiated. And over time, it kind of flew into hardware dominated product management and later into software dominated product management, right? Today, when we talk about product management, we largely talk about software product management, but it also exists in hardware companies. It also exists in non tech related companies, right? That's something we need to understand. And as a in its core, the job of a product manager is to solve problems and come up with the next product in solving for the customer problems which exist, and how do you drive business growth through the product that you build, right? So although the nuances differ across different sectors and companies, but it's still the same set of core skill sets that you need to build and develop and as a PM to succeed in any of these industries, right? Now, when you talk about how does product management vary in some of these sectors, the first nuance I want to bring in here is when we talk about hardware product management versus software product management, right? Now, to give you an example, a PM working in a Xiaomi company or a OnePlus company would be primarily doing hardware product management. These companies might also have both hardware product managers and software product managers, right? A hardware product manager would be designing the next model of the phone, what kind of specs to have there, what kind of features to focus on. Whereas a software product manager would be primarily optimizing the operating system which exists in the device or the UI of it, the user experience of it, right? The flavors differ slightly. In hardware product management, we are building hardware devices. The time spent in doing R&D, manufacturing the device and launching it, there's a longer lead time associated with doing that, right? And the opportunity to fail and kind of iterate is also limited because there is a good amount of investment you make in terms of manufacturing and launching the device. Whereas in software, you are primarily building web or mobile applications, which are easy to kind of iterate on and do quick experiments and on. And the cost of failure is not so much as you have in a hardware product management kind of a role. When you contrast PM roles at product versus service-based companies, in product-based companies, the focus is primarily on identifying the right set of customer problems, having a long-term mindset, and building products which differentiate from your competition. Right? You create a moat, you create a differentiated product which solves the customer problem. Whereas in service-based companies, the focus is more on kind of how do you optimize for costs, how do you automate things, and the culture is primarily is more towards sales or competition focused rather than customer focus. When you talk about B2C versus B2B, in B2C, you typically build products where you would be using those on a day-to-day basis as a user, right? So, and the challenge with B2C products is the cost of switching from one platform to another. Like for example, in e-commerce, for a customer to switch from an Amazon to Flipkart or vice versa, the cost of doing that is very low, right? So the focus becomes more on how do we create customer engagement, how do we create loyalty within the platform so that we retain our customers and don't let them kind of move to an alternate platform. Whereas in B2B, generally your revenue is driven by a very Pareto set of customers who have been engaging with the platform for long enough, and they kind of dictate your roadmap in a large way, and they kind of influence your deliverables in a large way. In terms of big tech versus startups, I think there is a cultural difference, right? In big tech, the products are much more evolved. If you think about the maturity stage of products, a lot of products have been there for a long amount of time. They have achieved product market fit. They're already doing well, and so you're optimizing the existing products or doing incremental launches to further optimize your products, right? So the focus shifts from launching something to how do we seek perfection, how do we build the next set of capabilities which addresses the customer pain points in the most meaningful way. Also, these corporates are large, A lot of them build platforms internally. So whenever you build a product, you'll have dependencies with a lot of your partner product teams or engineering teams. You'll have to understand what these dependencies are, resolve them when you build products. Since these are mature orgs, you have a lot of data which is flowing in on a regular basis. You depend a lot on this data and metrics to kind of make your decisions on a day-to-day basis as well. Whereas when you look at startups, because they're getting started, some of the startup, depending on the stage of the startup, a lot of them might not even have product market fit. They need to experiment quickly. They need to build MVPs, roll it out to customers and get quick feedback. And a lot of data doesn't exist. So you take a lot of intuition-led bold bets also in the initial phases of a startup. You prioritize speed over perfection so that you are early to market. You don't lose out on on the opportunity to be first to the market. And you also end up doing a lot of different roles, right? As a product manager, you don't limit yourself in just writing PRDs or launching products. You also do some part of product marketing. You engage with business teams to maybe do some sales projections. So you don a lot of different hats when you're working in a startup. So your role becomes more breadth first rather than depth first, and while you're working in startups. When you talk about different sectors, specifically in fintech, if you're working as a PM in fintech, you need a lot of domain knowledge, right? And generally fintech companies kind of prefer people who are coming from a fintech background as well, because they understand the domain, they understand the regulatory landscape associated with it. A lot of financial institutions are heavily regulated by authorities, right? So you need to understand and identify opportunities to innovate within the regulatory landscape. That's where your domain knowledge and context comes in very much handy. When you're talking about edtech or social media, content plays a big role. So you need to, it is not about just solving for the end consumer who is consuming content, but also solving for the creator ecosystem, right? How do you make things seamless for them? How do you enable growth for creators who are creating content on this media, right? When you talk about games, understanding user psychology becomes a very important nuance. Only when you understand user psychology, you can decide when to intervene, how to design your games in the right ways to keep the engagement levels high and to improve your retention models, right? So although the core PM skill sets kind of remain the same across the board, but depending on which sector, which company, what kind of scale of the company that you're working in, you end up kind of prioritizing certain things and deprioritizing certain things so as to deliver value for the company and the sector that you're working in. So you need to be very flexible in terms of understanding what is the need of the hour, what is the need of the company and the role you are in, and kind of and tune yourself to fit into that kind of role and the expectations that come with it.